Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for your patience and welcome. It's amazing. Oh, I was looking out there for a window, but it's just amazing that it's light. It's summer again, almost. So it's wonderful. Anyway, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. We're going to talk about two new stress reduction techniques, and you'll see a lot of overlap. I'm going to do some review because I think it's important to review the basic concepts since they're so important anyway. And what we're going to talk about today is practicing appreciation or gratitude, and how could gratitude possibly what's that? Oh, she got on. Wonderful. How could gratitude possibly down regulate, calm down the central nervous system? We'll talk about that, how that works. And then we're going to talk about tensing to relax. Again, kind of an oxymoron like jumbo shrimp or postal service or those kind of things, where we actually tense and then relax, and that actual process of accentuating the tension simulates the fight or flight. We'll get into that a little more because that's what happens in fight or flight. You tense, you're ready to hit or run, and then it accentuates the relaxation phase. Just like if you live in a noisy city and you drive out to the country and you get out of the car and you turn the engine off and you hear the crickets or hear the sounds that you never hear in the city, you're like, wow, because of the contrast. So the contrast helps us to evoke this relaxation response. All right, so here we go. So again, just to review, what is the fight or flight response? It is our body's hardwired automatic. This is key, right? Because we don't have to do anything to be in fight or flight, to be stressed out. Does anybody here have to work very hard to feel stressed? Make a conscious effort? No, me either. But to relax, we do have to make a conscious effort. This is one of those, of my long list of questions for God when I go back to heaven, right? Why couldn't the relaxation be automatic and the stress, you actually have to think about it? But this is the way it is, and that's the life we have to live. So automatic and unconscious, again, you don't have to think about it. It's just there. That prepares our body to fight off a perceived enemy or run from it. Hardwired, automatic, unconscious. And remember that virtually all stress-related medical, psychological, hormonal, and addictive disorders are related to an overactive fight or flight response. So I remember Dr. Engelfinger, who was the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine maybe 20 years ago, said 85% approximately of all medical issues are either caused by stress or exacerbated, made worse by stress. And that's because this fight or flight system has far-ranging effects on our body and our physiology. So we've got down here between 50 to 80%, but it's been predicted even higher. Now, what happens when we feel threatened? Remember, the brain stem is going to light up in a second. That's right here. And right in here, that area is what we call the locus ceruleus. That's a part of our primitive reptilian brain that controls, it ignites the fight or flight. It sends out a burst of norepinephrine, which is the chemical, the neurotransmitter, that then triggers the activation of the fight or flight response. It triggers nerve impulses to our adrenal glands, which then put out cortisol and adrenaline, and it triggers a wide variety of reactions in the body. It's a combination of chemical release and nerve cell firing that initiates this whole response. So the hypothalamus initiates, again, nerve cell firing and chemical release. Now, this is important because we're going to learn a new term today in the second part of the talk called neurosignature. And this was developed by Dr. Benson, who devised the relaxation response. And a neurosignature is simply a pattern of nerve cell firing and chemical release that the body retains as a memory. So what we'll learn, and I'll go over the details, but for example, if you visualize a beautiful sunset, that image, that being part of that, in that scene, triggers a reaction in our body, in our brain, that causes a release of certain chemicals and firing of certain neurons in the brain that triggers the calmness, the beauty, the relaxation that goes along with sitting and watching a beautiful sunset, or watching a shooting star, or the waves, come, the ebb and tide of the waves. But what we've also found from functional MRIs, where we can actually visualize what's going on in the brain as an activity is happening, is that imagining that once you've experienced that neurosignature, so every event has a neurosignature. Once you've experienced that sunset or that shooting star, or, me coming home and getting a hug from my daughter, whatever the neurosignature is that evokes that peaceful feeling, you can, by just imagining it, trigger that same neurosignature. So the brain, which we can visualize under MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, the same areas light up. And that distinct pattern of nerve cell firing and chemical release is what we call a neurosignature. So this holds a vital key for how we can just use the power of our mind and imagination to relax as well, assuming we've had some experience in the outside world. It would be like if you haven't had any, you would have no neurosignature for that event. You couldn't draw on it. But the contrary is true too, of course, is we have neurosignatures for all the nasty things that have happened. And again, those tend to come up more automatically than the good things. But that's how it all works. So it's all triggered from that brain stem, and then fires down into the nervous system, down to the adrenals, etc. So the nervous system in fight or flight, remember there are two parts of our automatic or autonomic nervous system that should be balanced. One is the sympathetic nervous system, and that's what we refer to as fight or flight. Now, the parasympathetic is the opposite of the fight or flight. It's the rest and digest. Okay, so that's the calming part of our nervous system. We can only appreciate beauty, calmness, relaxation when we have some stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the key is there's absolutely nothing we can do to control our sympathetic nervous system. Fight or flight, remember, is automatic, as is the sympathetic nervous system, which controls respiration, heart rate, pulse activity, brainwave activity, and this feeling of fight or flight. However, we can learn how to evoke the parasympathetic nervous system. There are certain techniques. Remember, we learned deep breathing. We're going to learn practicing appreciation and tensing to relax today. But all these things give us conscious voluntary control over our parasympathetic nervous system, which are the brakes that slow down the sympathetic. Yes. The question is, can you train yourself so that the parasympathetic, the brakes become well, you cannot train yourself so that becomes automatic. Yeah, because if you did, it would be like driving with your brakes on all the time. I mean, we do need a certain, remember that first curve we did in one of our talks called the Yerkes-Dodson curve? It was two physiologists in the early 1900s that said, hey, you looked on the y-axis is the productivity and performance, and on the x-axis horizontally is the amount of stress. And there's a point at which to be optimally productive, we need stress. I mean, you need to put your foot on the gas to accelerate. That's our sympathetic nervous system. But yeah, if you did that and you trained it to be automatic, we would all be on a, I don't know, back in the 60s. Yes, people with anxiety, that's why it's so critical. What you can do is become very good at triggering the parasympathetics. So when you're aware you're in sympathetic overdrive, then you have to learn how to apply the brakes. I mean, listen, it's an interesting lesson in life how it all works, because I remember when I first learned how to ski, the scariest thing about skiing is knowing how to stop. I mean, I didn't know how to stop. So you just crash into somebody or something. And so I realized that, hey, that's the most important first thing I need to learn is how do I put on the brakes? It's kind of easy to go down the hill, not with much grace, but it's very hard to learn how to stop and control your speed. So, right, in life too, we learn how to control our speed by these techniques too. And it sounds, these techniques sound so simple, but they are powerful when we use them. The problem is, of course, when we're in fight or flight, the last thing we really want to do is calm down. In some ways, you know, when you're under attack by the boss and he's just bugging you one too many times, or a nasty neighbor or coworker, you want to clobber him, right? I mean, you want to bring it to its natural conclusion, because the natural conclusion is to fight or to run and protect yourself. The natural conclusion's not to use your mind, your breathing, your, techniques, counting to 10 or whatever it is to slow down. The body, we were designed to fight or flee. And remember, that's the issue. Most of our stresses today are not life-threatening. They're not saber-toothed tigers attacking us. It's not a physical threat. It's an emotional, spiritual, psychological threat, and we can't run, and we can't fight it. That's that type 2 stress. So again, the sympathetic nervous system speaks only one language, red alert, and that's over on this side. You can see how many different vertebral or spinal nerves come off to trigger the sympathetic nervous system. It's way more than the parasympathetic. Look at the brakes. You've got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 ganglia, different areas of nerve cell firing that trigger the brakes. But we're geared to go here. You can look at how many nerves are involved in the fight or flight response. Now, it responds to perceived threat or harm, prepares the body for flight or fight with fast, shallow breathing, increased muscle tension. Remember, blood diverts away from the digestive tract. That's why chronic fight or flight is associated with irritable bowel symptoms or digestive difficulties or reflux or heartburn or whatever, because the blood goes away from the digestive tract. Why does it do that? Because when you're running from an enemy, you don't need to be digesting your food. You need all that blood out into your muscles, your skeletal nervous system, your skeletal muscles to run or mobilize strength. It diverts blood away from the frontal lobes. This is critical. Remember, we said people in fight or flight overdrive make frequent mistakes, make poor decisions, make irrational responses and decisions, because the blood actually goes away from the frontal lobes, which is where our rational thought exists. And where does it go? It goes to our reptilian and emotional brain, the limbic system, and to gear up to respond. It's a response. Those responses have to be automatic. We need the blood in those parts of us. And they've actually done studies that are amazing. There's, I don't know how many milliseconds before the cognitive brain registers, they can measure a gut response emotionally. They've even done it in the advertising industry. I've seen things where they'll show an evocative picture of some sort that either evokes something, frustrating in you, or angry, or enraging, or peaceful, and they can detect response in the limbic system, in the emotional system, milliseconds before the brain actually registers the thought about, hey, I'm looking at a picture of a boy about to get hit by a car. So that's why so many pictures are used in advertising, because the whole idea is to get the emotional response. They say we buy emotionally, and we rationalize it intellectually. Our decision to purchase things is an emotional one. Oh, I need this. This is going to help me. This is, I'm finally going to lose all that weight. With this piece of exercise equipment, I can hang up all my clothes. No, I'm not. You were supposed to run on them, but you know what I'm saying. They want you to get that emotional response, and then the cognitive response comes later, and then we justify it with our cognitive brain. So the sympathetic nervous system does turn on quickly, but it's incapable of turning itself off. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system, we can voluntarily turn that on. And when we turn that on, that is the brakes that then turns off the sympathetic, or down regulates it, slows it down, calms it down. And it promotes rest and digest. It gives us the ability to unwind, appreciate beauty around us, and promotes relaxation of skeletal muscles and calming of the mind. So let's first learn this life skill of tensing to relax. Again, these skills are coming from these 10 skills. This is I think we discussed the first 4, which were deep abdominal breathing. What was it? Yes, smiling. Thank you, everybody. And I can't remember the other ones. We'll go through them all at the end and review them. Not today, but anyway, this is 2 more techniques that come from this stress-free for good. So here's a case study on Kathy, who was stressed by her new boss. That's not my nurse, Kathy. She loves me. Who was a very demanding boss. She missed the friendliness and warmth at work, and simply picturing her boss's face caused her jaw to clench, her breathing to become shallow, her muscles to tighten, and her stomach to become upset. Why? I taught you this, she had a neurosignature for seeing the boss. She had already anchored in her central nervous system a pathway of nerve cell firing and chemical release, so that even just thinking about that miserable guy, could have been a woman, but boss, triggered all these things to happen as if they were really there. So what did Dr. Luskin do? He asked her, what do you do to relax? To which she laughed, as many of us do. And you say, what can you do to relax? Well, he taught her this life skill of tensing to relax, and he guided her in practicing the skill. And with time and practice, which it takes, she regained her ability to be hopeful, get perspective, because remember, perspective comes from our cognitive cerebral cortex. It doesn't come from our emotional brain. So the blood flow gets restored, you can get perspective, and you begin to relax your body, decrease tension and anxiety. Now, why, and it's sometimes difficult to know which technique will work best for which individual. On this individual, because there was a lot of muscle tension in her system already that he saw with the clenched jaw, tightened fist, that's a perfect one to do. Let's accentuate it, make it even stronger, and then by contrast, when you consciously relax, you'll feel that release, okay? So what good is tensing to relax? In a word, it relaxes the body first. So we're working remember, fight or flight's triggered in the brain. That's the critical part. It's triggered by rehashing an old argument or seeing a new threat or perceiving new harm or whatever. But here we're going to actually use the body to send a message to the brain to relax. Sometimes the brain sends the message to the body. Sometimes we use the body. This is what we talk about when we say it's a mind-body connection, is that you can work it both ways. The mind affects the body, but the body also affects the mind. If you go down to Mexico on a vacation and you get the Montezuma's Revenge, and your body is not cooperating, your mind doesn't feel so good. You know what I mean? Your thoughts aren't so wonderful and you're not so relaxed and calm. You feel miserable. So we can do it both ways, but excuse me, when we relax the body first, then the mind gets the message, and it turns on the parasympathetic nervous system. And in the end, what it does is it reduces stress and strain on the mind and body, turns off the fight or flight, stops the overproduction of stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline, decreases the muscle tension, improves mental clarity because the blood flow goes back. So in this skill of tensing to relax, you have access to a control switch that can turn off your overactive fight or flight response that is driving you to burnout. Excuse me. So again, no control over sympathetic, but you do have control over the parasympathetic. So what's actually happening is this: tensing your muscles first, and we'll go through this in a minute, simulates fight or flight, right? That's the I'm ready. I'm going to run or I'm going to clobber somebody. Then relaxing the muscles, which if you did fight somebody, because remember, the natural conclusion to fight or flight is fascinating. Think back to the proverbial caveman and the saber-toothed tiger. So they engage in this massive fight. There's an incredible expenditure of energy, and assuming the guy wins and the tiger's no longer a threat, then that guy has a heightened period where he just can't relax, but eventually, within a short period of time, he drops down to the floor in exhaustion, downs a couple quarts of Perrier or whatever he's got around, eats a meal and goes to sleep for about a day or two. I mean, the natural conclusion of fight or flight is vigorous physical activity. That's why exercise remains the #1 stress reducer of all these techniques. I would still say exercise beats them all. It's not enough, but in terms of sheer magnitude, it's going to hit closer to the way that response is supposed to, and not just like jogging, but I mean sprinting till you collapse. That would be fight or flight exercise. Interval training, where you sprint, you work hard, and then you're just drop exhausted. So relaxing those muscles, that's the natural conclusion of fight or flight. So by accentuating the tension, and we'll all do this in a minute, and then relaxing, the body then gets, okay, now there's a neurosignature of the threat is over, the harm is gone, I can relax. My mind can stop looking for the enemy, running from the enemy, perceiving everybody as the enemy, seeing all the bad things in life. This, by the way, is where appreciation comes in, right? Because when you're in fight or flight, and we'll get into this and much more, you're not appreciating the beautiful scenery as you're running from the tiger. Oh, what a beautiful lake that is. You're just in fear, right? You're in emotion. So, who is the genius behind tensing to relax? This guy right here, Dr. Edmund Jacobson, a physician who discovered that we can activate, and what he found out was very interesting. He found out we can activate specific muscles just by imagining doing an activity. Look what he did. And this was, I think, Jacobson, I can't even remember, early 1900s we're talking. 1920s, 30s, something like that. I think. I could be wrong. He placed electrodes on the body to measure muscle activity while patients imagined performing activities that utilize different muscle groups. Like imagine eating, or imagine swinging a baseball bat, or imagine running. And he would have electrodes on all these muscles. They weren't actually doing it, but he would detect just in the thinking about it some activity already going into those muscles. Not enough to actually move the arms and move the limbs, but to signal that something's happening in the brain. So he was picking up kind of that neurosignature of whatever event he was asking them. So if you imagine walking, he found activity in the muscles that help you walk. If you imagine eating, there was activity in the jaw muscles. So what he deduced from this was, look, that many medical problems resulted from people creating muscle tension without being aware they were doing so. I mean, really, if you think about it, how aware are we of the things we think of sometimes? I mean, Yes, that's the bit that, and the back pain is a classic example of a very, I mean, look, in many cases it's a purely physical phenomenon, but in a lot of cases of chronic back pain, yeah, it's muscle tension from people thinking about, and it's not necessarily that they're thinking about when they hurt their back or walking that would tire your back out. They may just be thinking of something that makes them mad, and they happen to have tension in their low back muscles. Remember, everybody has like a weak link. So if there's generalized muscle tension, some people may get tension headaches, some people are going to get irritable bowel, some people are going to get back pain. I mean, everybody, I always describe it as a link. And if there's pressure on both sides of the chain, everybody does have a weak link. So if there's tension, it's going to break somewhere first. Which one? Yeah, carpal tunnel. I haven't heard too much about the mind-body effect in carpal tunnel because it's a canal that the median nerve goes through that there's not much skeletal muscle there. It's just that sometimes you get swelling. The repetitive use causes swelling in that canal that pinches on it. So it's not really a fight-flight thing per se. Um, and you look at this book. Do you all remember these books? I remember these. You don't remember covers that look like this? A genuine pocketbook? I remember growing up with, yeah, the brand of book, not this particular book. But so this was his book. I forget the copyright, but Edmund Jacobson, and this is such a great title. He kept it simple. You must relax. Yeah, go home and practice. That I'm going to start doing that with all of you when you come in. You must relax. I'll see you later. I, I'm not as firm as he is. I like that. I like his. I smile. Yeah, he goes right to the point. I love it. You must relax. I think that's great. What's that? Yeah, I grin and laugh. I crack a joke. I use internal jogging, laughter. Okay, so working too hard, question mark, worrying too much, fatigued or sleepless. Oh man, you knew this was a bestseller, right? It would be today if they republished it. Okay, so to help reduce the muscle tension, Dr. Jacobson developed this focus technique on tensing and relaxing specific muscles. And what we know now is medical research shows this technique can positively benefit a variety of stress-related conditions, including chronic pain, muscle strain, tension headache, back and neck pain, grinding one's teeth, cardiovascular problems, recovery from strokes, and athletic performance. Remember the two types of stress I'm taught? Type 2 down here, type 1 is it's immediate. It's the saber-toothed tiger, right? There it is, or the car crossing the midline coming at you. Boom, you got to act now. It's an immediate, easily identifiable stress that you act on. Type 2 stress is that chronic. You don't know, it's indistinct. We don't know where's it come from. It's like sitting in the traffic jam, or deadlines or bills to pay in the back of your mind, like the one sitting in my suitcase for the last 2 weeks that I think I'm going to get to that. You know, it's those things that gnaw at you and they just bug you and you go, I got to get to that. I got to do that. That's type 2 stress. It doesn't have a clear beginning. It doesn't have a clear end. And this is the stuff that does the damage. Amazingly enough, and I'll give you a perfect example. There's a lot of literature that says people who have high stress jobs, executives in high stress positions, and this was Susan Kobas's research on the 3 C's, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute if I can remember. But what she said is she studied these high-level executives. The stress in the executives did not cause damaging effects in most of their health. The ones who suffered from the effects of high stress were the ones that had very little decision latitude. They could not make decisions about their job that let them adjust their schedule. People on assembly lines, it's like, you know, That's type 2 stress. You remember that Lucy episode where she's, okay, that's type 2 stress. It's coming and you got to keep up and there's nothing you can do to change it. So these 3 C's, what she found the executives had were a sense of control. If they had the ability to control something in their environment or their schedule or when they had to face that stress, it didn't affect them as much. A commitment. They were committed to, I can't remember exactly what, it was control, commitment. I can't remember the exact details of the commitment, but they were committed to something more important in their life, you know, that they were willing to put up with stress to do that, and challenge, that they saw stress as a challenge to improve themselves or to improve the lives of somebody they were working for, something. They didn't see it as a threat. So those 3 C's were buffers against stress. Yes. Yes. Yeah, there's some amazing animal studies. Alice was talking about them. Yeah, the monkey ones. I originally, when I first started studying stress, I learned the studies on the rat or mice, the rodents, and it was fascinating. They would hook 2 rodents up to the same shock, electrical shock. One had a door that they could escape, and the other was stuck. Now, they turned on the shock. As soon as the one that, you know, felt it and ran out the door, it turned off the shock for both of them. So they both had the identical amount of physiologic stress. They got shocked the exact same period of time. But the ones that didn't have control over escaping were the ones that developed the ulcers or the tumors or whatever it is. Oh, there was one cage didn't have a door. So it was only the one that had the door that could escape. When it learned how to escape and it got out, the shock stopped for both of them. But the one that knew that it had the opportunity to escape didn't develop problems. But the other one, even though it was the identical amount of stress, developed all the problems. And then, of course, that's what developed Martin Seligman's whole theory of learned helplessness. That after a while, if you produce a shock long enough that people cannot escape from, the animals, these were dogs jumping over a barrier, eventually they stopped trying. Even when they changed the dynamics and they could now escape, they just stopped trying. It's like that proverbial story about, you know, tying the elephant with a little string when it's a baby. You tie it to a post, and then as it grows, and as a little baby it can't pull away, but then it grows into this big elephant. You tie a little string to a post, the elephant won't move away. It's learned helplessness. It believes it has the neural signature for I can't do it. It doesn't even try. So of course that's a critical, you know, thing in all stress reduction is, look, we're talking about giving you techniques, but a whole nother level is people who've been so shocked in life, post-traumatic stress, whatever, that they completely stop trying. You teach them these things and they'll like, nothing's going to work. I'm not, you know, so you've got a whole nother level. That's where therapy is just, obviously, Alice, you've done a lot with that. Sheep. Wow, that's an incredible, yeah, because we're very affected by our environment, you know, not just physical, but psychological, et cetera. And that's, again, those are neurosignatures. They went back to, it triggered the whole event, not unlike, this happens in body work all the time, by the way, that people who carry a lot of tension in a certain area, a lot of the more skilled, like rolfers or body therapists, when they work out pain in a muscle, a lot of times patients will have a tremendous emotional release. They'll start weeping or crying or remembering some traumatic episode when they were young, and not even knowing that that neurosignature for that pain was stored in that actual physical muscle, and it took that release to, this is why the body-mind and the mind-body have to be dealt with together. And one day, every doctor's office, I wish we could do it here, you'll see the doctor, but then on the way out, you'll get your massage and you'll get it's got to be worked from every angle to really make a difference. So whenever we experience this type 2 stress, intensing to relax, an effective tool for dealing with it and diminishing, shutting down the toxic, boy, that makes no sense at all. I must have been writing this in my sleep. Okay, the point is here, we can choose a healthy response to too much stress, or we become victims of it and deal with burnout. And of course, I didn't know when we talked about this we'd even get into learned helplessness, but that adds a whole nother dimension to the picture. So here it is. Let me explain it first, and then we'll just go through a quick exercise, and we'll do it, okay? Here's the life skill. You're going to take 2 deep belly breaths. We learned how to do that. Remember, one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly. As you breathe in, the belly goes out first, shoulders up, and then you release. Okay, so in with the belly out. Finish off the breath up in your chest and deflate the balloon. So it's like a balloon's blowing up in your belly. So after you do the 2 belly breaths, on the 3rd breath, what we're going to do first is just tighten our right arm from our shoulder to our hand. Let's just try that first. Just don't do it with the breathing. Just on the count of 3, tense everything up from the shoulder to the fist. Hold it for 3 seconds and relax it, okay? Now we're going to divide the body into sections. Now do it with the left shoulder to the fingers. Make a fist, tighten up your shoulder. You'll get a little bit of your upper chest, but that's okay. And relax, okay? So we do right arm, left arm, and there's no sense to the order. However, it's whatever system you develop. Then we're going to do each lower extremity. So the second part will be from your butt to your toes. So on the right side, tighten up your butt all the way down to your foot and try not to get a cramp. And relax, okay? And now do it on the other side. Tighten the buttock, the thigh, the calf, and the foot, and relax. And then the 5th thing, so we've got extremity, extremity, lower, lower, and then the 5th thing will be the whole body at once. So just do it with me and tighten up your whole body, scrunch your face muscles, do everything on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And relax. You got to be careful because you can pull your back out or twist your neck, or so you don't have to so if you do that with the belly breaths, and if you take a moment during that relaxing phase and take another deep breath and just notice the contrast. If you take a moment to put your mind into it, it's hard for me to do now with you because I'm standing up, but you have to be sitting, and then you really can just let your body relax afterwards and feel how much more you can relax. Does that make sense? Is this like self-hypnosis, Alice says? Ah, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah. So, and you can add an affirmation, when you relax, like I'm relaxed and calm, or I'm learning how to relax, or I'm enjoying relaxing my muscles, whatever you want to do. But you hold for 2 to 3 seconds as you exhale, fully relax, let that part go limp, and then just, and that's it. Well, if you go through this for 10 minutes, your mind will automatically follow. It does because, not if, your wife's in the background calling you to clean up the garage or something. But, you got to do it at the right time. Okay? Yes. Accentuate. This does, I'm trying to think of another parallel where we do this kind of thing. Can't think of one right off the bat, but yeah, you're going to accentuate it. So by contrast, you see that what you felt wasn't. No, look, I just thought of the parallel. In therapy, it happens all the time. I mean, I don't know if they still do this technique, but remember where people going through a lot of emotional trauma might, you know, take it out on the pillow and physically just, you know, beat up the pillow in this Gestalt type therapy. And it's accentuating the anger and just, you know, and then afterwards this kind of release. Now, it doesn't always work. You know, sometimes you can just get better at being angry. You know what I mean? It's like practicing your anger. So it's best with guided therapy and people to help you work through the emotional end. But from this physical end, yeah, you're accentuating it so you can, by contrast, now you can feel relaxation, which you couldn't before. You didn't even know you're just tight. Remember, he says the jaws were tight. People didn't even know they were thinking about something, and that's what Dr. Jacobson realized. There's activity there. So let's move on so we have time to cover the appreciation and the life skill of so much to appreciate. This again comes from the book. What's the name? I forgot the name of the book already. Stress Free for Good. And this is another case study from the book about George. George over here. This is not the real George. His identity has been changed to protect his. But George could describe exacting details of the pressure he experienced at work in a Silicon Valley startup, as well as his frustrations at the way his demanding boss talked to him. He arrived early and left late every day and enjoyed the challenge of the job, but not his new manager, Tom, who was a poor communicator and critical perfectionist. Here again, we have another neurosignature happening. When George saw Tom coming, he had to bite his tongue and exercise extreme self-restraint to keep from screaming at him. George's stresses were legitimate ones, and he suffered because of them. But what Dr. Luskin realized in talking more to him, he also suffered because he lost sight of the good things in his life. Now, we know why, right? Chronic fight or flight, blood flow goes away from the cognitive into the sympathetic nervous system. You're just looking for enemies. You're perceiving enemies, you're fleeing from enemies. Everybody becomes the enemy. You can't appreciate the good when you're in fight or flight. So the blood flow leaves that part of the brain that can think rationally as well. So he could only see this. I came up with this new word, you'll see why, stressings, because it rhymes with blessings. And we're going to go into the BS teeter-totter here in a minute, which I came up with for this talk, the blessing, stressing teeter-totter. I'll show you how that works. So the BS teeter-totter. So he could only see the stressings, the things that stressed him in life, and not the blessings in life. So he had to have an appreciation breakthrough, and here's the treatment Dr. Luskin led him. He said, okay, rant and rave for a little, go ahead, get it out, talk about it a little bit. But then Dr. Luskin asked him how he felt about his family. And it became very clear that he loved his wife, loved his kids. He hated being so exhausted and stressed out that he couldn't appreciate them. But and you could, you ask these, oh, yeah, family's great, Suddenly, what did you do? You switched him from concentrating on all the anger to thinking of something, a neurosignature, which relaxed him. And he said to Dr. Luskin, hey, my family isn't the problem. And this is one of the most brilliant responses. Now, I know Dr. Luskin's a brilliant teacher and clinician. And Dr. Luskin replied, well, we know your family's not the problem, but they might be the solution. Isn't that interesting? So already he was thinking we can create a neurosignature from the thing that gives him the most joy in his life, thinking about his family, and teach him how to practice that skill of focusing on the good. So he was encouraged to think about how much he appreciated his family and realized that this job allowed him to support the family he loved, and he had an appreciation breakthrough. And again, this is all reframing, right? This is all like taking an ugly picture and you put it in this nice new frame with all this, and suddenly It looks more beautiful. Nothing changed about the actual picture, but he's able to reframe his experience. So with the practice of remembering to appreciate, he shifted his point of view. Again, perspective comes back when the blood starts flowing to the rational brain again, and he began to feel thankful for the job that supports his family. Now, that being said, you also want to decide, is this some situation you want to stay in long term? And, we're talking about how, given this situation, can I improve my life, knowing that it's perfectly reasonable to think maybe he wants to get into his own company and not have to deal with a miserable boss and start working on that stuff. But in the meantime, you don't have to keep suffering because of it. So why did appreciation help George? I've kind of already given you the ideas here before, earlier in the talk. When he practiced appreciation, it activated that parasympathetic nervous system and turned down the overactive fight or flight. And noticing the good things helped reverse that fight or flight. And remember, when you focus on the stress, you see everything and everyone in your environment as the enemy, a potential threat to your survival. It's not conscious, right? It's automatic. I mean, this is no different than if you go in a room, and every time you're in a room with this person, they step on your foot, okay? And it happens so many times that, the next time you're in there, you're looking the other way, somebody steps on your foot, it will turn out to be a different guy, but you're going to blame the guy the guy's always stepping on my foot, right? So the point is that we see everything, our perception narrows. It's impossible to think that somebody else actually stepped on my foot. I mean, this guy's always stepping on my foot, and yeah, it happens all the time, that we kind of blame. It happens in marriages a lot, right? If one of us did something to our spouses that, I don't know, upset them or something, and we borrowed something, we didn't put it back. And then they come and they say, it's gone again. Well, where did you put it? Well, I didn't take it. And, it turned out to be my daughter took it, right, this time. But I'm going to get blamed. I'm the enemy. So that narrow perception becomes a critical part of expanding our perception becomes a critical part of living a happier, healthier life. So in fight or flight, the mind cannot think appreciative and loving thoughts. And because there's a Pavlovian connection, you ring the bell, you put the food, the dog salivates. Then you do that enough, and you pair the bell with the salivation. And then eventually you just ring the bell. Even if you don't give the food, the dog salivates. Well, dogs don't salivate at a bell. They salivate at food. But you took the food away, but it still salivates, right? You cannot appreciate loving thoughts when you're in fight or flight. So in fight or flight, it cancels that out. But if you think loving thoughts, it will also cancel out the fight or flight because they're never paired. Fight or flight is not paired with loving thoughts. It's paired with thoughts of threat and harm and danger. So if you can, force yourself or practice or learn how to think loving thoughts or practice appreciation or gratitude, it automatically says there's a disconnect. And the brain says, well, I can't be in fight or flight if I'm thinking loving thoughts. You know what I'm saying? So stress is automatic, but relaxation, appreciation, gratitude must be consciously evoked. When you think loving thoughts, your mind and body realize there's nothing to defend against, and the fight or flight response can start to wind down. Basically, you surrender. You say, I'm going to stop the fight and turn off you say to the fight or flight, hey, we're surrendering. I'm thinking loving thoughts. This is my white flag. Turn off stop firing. Stop shooting at me. Stop harassing me. So what good is practicing appreciation? Well, one of my favorite authors, Dennis Prager, author and ethicist and founder of Prager University, has a wonderful video on this. You should watch it. It's prageruniversity.com. It's free. You go there and watch his video. It's something about happiness and gratitude or something like that. And he has the happiness hour, yeah, every week on the. But he asked this question: what is the most important quality in human life? The most important thing that you can be? And the answer: grateful. Now, why? Because gratitude is the basis of the two most important things in life: happiness and goodness. When we feel it's very hard to find an ungrateful person who goes around doing good things for other people. So goodness and that quality of kindness and caring about other people and staying out of fight or flight and what he considers ethically the most important thing on his happiness hour, because his happy people make the world a better place. Unhappy people make it a more miserable place. And so if he says that we have a moral obligation to be happy, just like we have an obligation to, brush our teeth and put on deodorant and smell decent if we're going to be around other people. It's like hygiene. Happiness becomes sort of like good, spiritual hygiene. So, but he says that everything good flows from gratitude, everything bad flows from ingratitude. Now, stress is the greatest risk factor. Dr. Ron Getzel evaluated over 100,000 employees of Citibank, and what he found is that too much stress was more likely to make people ill and disabled. Now listen to this, than all the familiar risk factors like smoking, obesity, or high blood pressure. Isn't that amazing? What's that? Yes. Yeah. I mean, cancer's a relatively, look, it's still number 2, but compared to heart disease, it's much less. And stress has a much greater relationship to heart disease than cancer, although there is a significant relation between stress and cancer. The literature is just filled with, the fact that many people who develop cancer go through a serious depression or depressive episode 12 to 18 months prior to their development. Because just think, most cancer is an immune system. The immune system becomes unable to monitor changes in the cell, genetic variations that happen every time a cell divides, and it stops the ability of these, that normally the immune system would stop these abnormal cells from continuing to divide. So there is a relationship between both, but what he's saying is that the more likely, so stress is a big player. The inability to stop and smell the roses is part and parcel of the body's stress response. And unrelenting stress, again, limits our ability to appreciate the good in life because the stress response involves searching for danger. So I'm going to do this little exercise, and I learned this 25 years ago at a seminar I went to. I want you to take a minute and look around the room and look for everything that's brown. I want you to just notice everything that's brown, and I'm going to give you like 10 seconds. Yeah. So you could give me a list of the things that are brown. Okay, that's enough. Now I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. And I want you to tell me everything in the room that's green. That's rude. Okay, you can open your eyes. So what's the point? Is that we only see what we're looking for. If we look for the things in life that are brown, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what we're going to notice. If we look for the people who are out to get us, we're going to be suspicious of everybody. We're going to notice only the people that are out to get us, right? If we look for the good in people, there's a great chance that we'll find it. Now, sometimes we'll find bad, obviously, but, in general, this self-fulfilling prophecy, this perceptual, disconnect that we do automatically without thinking about it, we have to pay attention to. We should be looking for the good things. And this is a really basic religious principle. I know in Hasidic Judaism, it's a major mitzvah or good deed to always look for the best possible explanation of harm that was done, to give everyone the greatest benefit of doubt. In other words, we think right away, oh, those miserable cheat, they stole my, and we have to think it's always incumbent upon us to try and think first of other possible good explanations to explain what they did, probably because, this principle is a truism in life. If we look for the bad, we're likely to find it, right? What was the word you said to me? Somebody said after I said, oh, how rude. Yeah, I like that. How rude. Yeah, well, good thing there's no grade on this test, okay? So shifting your attention from stress to bless, that's what we're talking about, from brown to green, okay? What can it do in the medical literature? Can lower your blood pressure, can give your immune system a boost. Dr. David McClellan did wonderful studies. They call it the Mother Teresa effect. They showed movies to students on Mother Teresa caring for the sick. And then they measured their immune function after, and the immune function improved in almost all those students who watched films of somebody doing good, caring for the, poor in Calcutta or whatever. It can lower your heart rate, can calm your stomach and intestinal tract, can augment your creativity, shut down the fight or flight. And what Dr. Luskin and Dr. Peltier, the authors of the book, say, the power of appreciation is as simple and profound as belly breathing. Remember, we learned how profound belly breathing is, and they're saying this power of practicing appreciation is equally as profound as the belly breathing. Now, here's what I came up with, the BS teeter-totter. Are you noticing the blessed? Here's this guy. I'm on top of my blessings. I'm over here. When you focus on your blessings, that little arrow points to the happiness, right? We choose what we're going to focus on. Now this little guy rolls over here. He's focused not on his blessings but his stressings, and he ends up disappointed in life. And obviously, our teeter-totters move up and down a lot in life, but we can control where we focus, what we choose, blessed or stressed. So when you come in, I'm going to say, don't give me no BS, right? Oh, yeah, you like how I made, I love doing that. Okay, so which is more pleasant? That's another way to ask yourself the question. I mean, we have a choice. So which is more pleasant, counting your problems or counting your blessings? So you have to decide. Yes, at any yes. There's always good and bad. That being said, at any given time, we can still focus on what is good and be grateful for that. Because as we all, look at, I'll give you the humorous quip on that, is that extension of Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law is anything that can go wrong will. Well, there's Gattuso's extension of Murphy's Law, which says nothing is ever so bad that it can't get worse. Okay? So that's the point. Even if you count your blessings and your stressings and you come out short on the blessings, focus on those, because those could be taken from you too. So, So I'm going to go briefly into the neuros. Yeah. Well, you remember how I started the stress talk. Yes, that's the positive outlook. Nothing's ever so bad it can't get better. That's the optimist. You're blessing. That's good. Remember how I started the stress talk, that Rudyard Kipling perversion, or whatever we'll call it. Remember the poem, Rudyard Kipling, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs? You know how that poem goes, then I forget the rest of it. But the stress, Rudyard Kipling stress quip is, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, then you just don't understand the problem, right? So okay, so the basic premises of mind, body, spirit medicine, just briefly, and then we're done. All our thoughts and feelings are chemical. This kind of review from past talks. Remember, our mind translates, and neurosignatures is where it happened. I mean, neurosignatures are basically the name, and you can't, measure a neurosignature. You can see it, remember, and I'll show you how, because the functional MRIs, but basically there's a lot of overlap in different areas of the brain. It's not an exact science like, word A, word B, word C, chemical A, chemical B, It's not like we can measure an insulin level. We measure a neurosignature, but neurosignatures are the sort of research concept of how words and thoughts become feelings, or thoughts and feelings become chemical, because these thoughts and feelings trigger nerve impulses and chemical release in the body. So all our thoughts, all our feelings, and again, the simple example is a scary dream. You wake up, it was a pretend dream, it wasn't real, but your heart's pounding, it's racing, you're sweating, you're breathing. I mean, that's a real chemical response to an imaginary image, So neuropeptides and neurotransmitters are one of the many chemical messengers of thought and feeling. And I'm going to introduce a concept that I was actually taught by my a great therapist that I know that is a does men's work and stuff, and I was involved with work he did for like 9 years and in a support group, and it was wonderful. And he taught me this concept. I don't know what we were talking about, but he says that all healing involves making the invisible visible. Now, it sounds like a nice saying, making the invisible visible, but what does that mean? And I'm going to show you here. So we want to make the invisible visible. That's a really important thing. So I'm going to draw on the wellness iceberg. John Travis, MD in Northern California, came out with the wellness workbook in the late 70s, I think. And I've loved this concept of it's kind of the concept of an iceberg. Here's the water level, so that our physical health represents the tip of the iceberg, right? The visible part. But underneath that visible physical health that we can measure, do an EKG on, and, take a blood pressure on, is our lifestyle choices, which so dramatically impact our physical health, right? And then the psychological choices, which so dramatically affect our lifestyle choices, right? If we're psychologically uncomfortable, overly shy, we start to shield ourselves, we choose a lifestyle that becomes more reclusive, less social interaction, more prone to, you can draw the connection between any psychological a quality or trait or imperfection and the lifestyle that might result from that, and then the health response, the quality of health that will respond from that lifestyle choice. And then underneath it all is really our spiritual choices, which what I mean by this is our sense of belonging, our sense of connection, our sense of meaning, of purpose, of a higher purpose or in life, something that makes our life worth living, that gives it meaning, right? So that so often at a deep level, there's a spiritual shame or defect or just inadequacy that leads all the way up the scale here. So if you look here, though, these are all, now our lifestyle choices to some degree are visible, right? Not all of them, but certainly the psychological and spiritual choices are invisible. These happen every second of the day. So we go from invisible to visible. So this is one of the ways that helping to make the invisible visible. If we can start to understand and through therapy or whatever kind of work, maybe through a change in exercise or diet, we then might uncover some of our psychological choices. So we're deep digging down into these invisible areas, and as we reveal these things that drive certain of our behaviors or lifestyle choices, we have a chance at really affecting our level of physical health and well-being. So again, healing involves making the invisible down here visible. Does that make a little more sense now? I'll explain it even more. How do we make the invisible visible in three-dimensional physical reality? Well, think of a CT scan. A CT scan makes an invisible tumor visible. So we go through, we can't really see what's inside, but we do the scan and, oh my God, there's a tumor on our liver, or something going on in our brain, or, God forbid. But then once it's visible, we can then attack it. We can get a treatment plan and we can go after it, and hopefully some chemotherapy or surgery or radiation or whatever, and get rid of it. So again, even on a very practical level, what do we do when we draw blood? We're making the invisible visible. I mean, it sounds silly and you never think of it like that, but it's all an effort to make these invisible things visible. And the reason I want to draw the metaphor is because on a psychological, spiritual level, where we're talking about stress, something as invisible as stress, the way to get a hold of our stress and really begin to understand it better is to make visible some of those unconscious automatic choices or thoughts or feelings we have that lead us to choose either make stressful decisions, make bad decisions, choose stressful lifestyles, etc. So how do we understand, we know how to make a tumor visible through a CAT scan on a physical level. How do we make this invisible spiritual, psychological level visible? Awareness, and most importantly, I think, putting words to our thoughts and feelings. I mean, really, what's therapy? I mean, what is half the importance of a good bedside manner, which we can't quantify a doctor that has a great bedside manner, but my mother used to tell me back in the day, when her mom and dad came here, I mean, doctors had very little in their toolbox. And yet, there was a tremendous amount of people that got better because somehow just coming in and reassuring, and the Norman Rockwell painting, I mean, just sitting by the bedside and holding their hand and putting words to the feelings of fear and giving hope, that stuff triggers our healing system. So hope and positive feelings get triggered. So putting words to our thoughts and feelings in order to sort of change the meaning of life for us, or change an understanding or reframe events, becomes very critical. This, by the way, so our words become a visible symbol of the invisible world of our feelings, our mind, our thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs, and our soul, our sense of purpose, meaning, belonging, and connectedness. So putting words to our feelings is a vital pathway to our healing system. And I could give you study after study, I don't have any right off the bat here to tell you, of how true this is, of just the ability to emotionally connect with another person, to feel a sense of connection. Well, all the studies on social support. When you feel part of a social group or something bigger than yourself, there's a tremendous amount of healing. It opens hearts. There's studies that show that a good social support or positive social support is as effective in reducing the risk of heart disease and stroke. I think stroke for sure, heart disease, as lowering cholesterol, lowering blood pressure, all these things that we think are so the end all, but they're not. These other things are important. Our thoughts, our feelings are critical, and they're essential for all healing. So we know that we can put words to our stressed feelings quite easily, but we can also choose to put words to our blessed feelings. And the words we speak to ourselves, that self-talk. Remember in the 70s when all this stuff, self-talk, come out, the conversations we have with ourselves become very critical to living a healthy, whole life. And again, Herbert Benson, the guy I got to study with a bit back in the 80s, who developed the relaxation response, he's the one that first came up with this term neurosignatures. And all life events have neurosignatures, which are these complex patterns of nerve cell firing and chemical release. And they come from one of four places. They're either factory installed or hardwired. For example, our fight or flight response is a neurosignature. Think of it like a software program. You hit the button and that tape plays, that software program plays. It's fight or flight. So some of our neurosignatures are factory installed. The others come from learned experiences. Visualize actually being at the sunset, actually watching the stars during a meteor shower and watching the shooting stars and just totally relaxing and saying, wow, that's amazing. 3, present experience, things we're having right now. This talk is creating a neurosignature for future talks. So I can come in at the next talk and I don't have to say anything and you'll learn something. No, I'm just kidding. If it triggers the neuro, yeah, there's a limit to neurosignatures, but and then future imagined experiences. So remember, when we just visualize something, this is where the whole guided imagery happens. I have a guided imagery tape on surgery. The data on guided imagery and surgery is unbelievable. It like gets you out of the hospital 1 to 3 days faster. It reduces the need for pain medicine by like 30 to 40%. It improves recovery on so many parameters. And what I do in the guided imagery talk is I just lead you through the surgery. It's flight simulation, just like pilots. We're practicing, we're rehearsing, but we're doing it in a controlled environment where we can create the effect that we want. So you see how important that is. So, and neurosignatures, again, are stored in the mind and the body as memories. The mind, remember, we can evoke the sunset. The body work, we hit the point, there's emotional release and healing. Two types of neurosignatures: top down, which is we imagine the experience, we imagine the sunset. If we want to think of a time, it doesn't have to be only in the future. It could be it's a past event. And this is what Herbert Benson, in one of our other talks, we talked about remembered wellness, that he thinks that's a part of the placebo response. Why we get better when there's nothing active in the chemical we take, because there's a sense of remembered wellness. We're being taken care of. Somebody's giving us that medicine, even though it turns out to be inert. Somebody is part of the healing process. Placebo effect, right. Yeah, so remembered wellness is part of that. We're actually evoking a neurosignature for wellness. It's not something in that particular chemical that made us well, like an antibiotic would kill a strep, like penicillin would kill strep, but it's what we symbolically believe. I'll give a whole talk one day on the placebo response. But the new definition of the placebo response is it's not the pill, it's the symbolic meaning of that pill. So when we know that, the Norman Rockwell painting, the guy gave him some herbs that he mixed up here, this will make you well. Well, that herbs was like eating a stick of celery. But he got better because he believed that this was going to make him better. And that triggered a neurosignature, and that's enough to create the chemicals, right, for healing. So there's top down and then there's bottom up. Bottom up just means experiencing it for the first time. So experiencing that sunset from the environment in through our senses up to our brain where the pathway is created. So this was the first study that triggered this whole area of research. Dr. Coslin and Alpert, way back in '93, Journal of Cognitive Neurosciences, they, by PET scan technology, which lights up certain areas of the brain on an ongoing basis. So if what they'll do is take a PET scan while you're playing a video game or while you're relaxing or whatever, and they see the change in which areas light up, which areas dim down, where the activity, where the blood flow is. So what they found is that the same parts of the brain are activated whether people actually experience something or just vividly imagine it. It's just remarkable, isn't it? So that brings me to some of my favorite quotes. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, I've experienced many terrible things in my life, a few of which actually happened. Right? This is when it works against you. Norman Cousins, my other hero, Anatomy of an Illness, he says, the human mind converts ideas and expectations into biochemical realities, again, through these neurosignatures. And I love this saying of Norman Cousins as well. There are forces in the human mind that are no less powerful than the physician's prescription pad. So we live in parallel worlds. There's always good, there's always bad, there's always BS. There's blessings and there's stressings. Hey, that came out pretty good. I didn't plan that. It worked right in, right? See, even me with enough practice, what is this, our like 10th talk or something? I'm getting better. Okay, we can always focus on the bad or the good. That's our choice, and that determines a lot about how happy we're going to be in life. So again, the life skill of practicing appreciation, to summarize, here's how Dr. Luskin and Peltier recommend you do it. Before you begin your day, write down your to-do list. Then write down your to-thank list. I like that, right? To-do list and your to-thank list. Write down 2 things you're grateful for, 2 people you appreciate, 2 experiences you're grateful for, whatever it is, 2 things. Then when your day becomes stressful, take your belly breaths. On the third one, this is the appreciation. You can either tense and relax and do the what's it called, the words that you say, the affirmation, or just do the affirmation and think of those things that you're grateful for. Focus now on the to thank list. Think of someone you love, a beautiful place, a tranquil time in your life, or an act of kindness done for you, or an act of kindness you did for others. And then spend a few moments focusing your full attention on that feeling and let it kind of unwind, turn off that fight or flight. So that's it. Are there any questions or any other things? Yes, Pat. No, it's beautiful. That was Norman Cousins' great discovery. You cannot. That's correct. That's exactly right. That the laughter, this is where Norman Cousins had I think it was ankylosing spondylitis or some rheumatic condition, I can't remember, caused him severe pain. And he was in the hospital. The doctors were trying to figure out how to help him. They didn't really know much. And he realized that watching some old movies, I can't remember, it was the Three Stooges or Laurel and Hardy or what. He realized when he was laughing, he would experience relief from his pain. And then he just focused completely on doing this in a very predictable way for hours and hours a day. And this is the subject of his book, Anatomy of an Illness. He basically helped to heal himself by turning off his fight or flight and triggering the healing elements in the body. Remember, it's so easy, and this is the thing that's so amazing, because you think, okay, the symbolic meaning of a pill can heal you, or an antibiotic can heal you. Now, sometimes we need both, but we still don't know how antibiotics work. They kill the bacteria, but believe me, Louis Pasteur on his deathbed realized it's not just the bacteria, it's the host. It's the environment of the host. It's more than just this bacteria. That's why people who are so obsessive about sneezing and germs, I laugh, because that alone creates, a neurosignature for fear and illness. I mean, these things can only cause illness in a compromised host. So we have to say, and by a host, I mean our whole being, our mind, our body, our spirit, our sense of connectedness. And I mean, there are some illnesses that are clearly at one extreme, or the other. Some that are just psychological basket cases, and some that are just purely physical. You swallow a cyanide capsule and you think all the happy thoughts you want, it's over, right? So there are some things that you can't, but the overwhelming majority of things, but we don't realize that they both trigger chemical responses in the body, and healing responses. And there's still healing's still a tremendous mystery. So what Rachel Naomi Remen, who's one of the authors that I studied early on in my mind-body studies, she says there's always mystery and there's mastery. So we master the physical principles we can, and then we appreciate that there's always a component of mystery. There's the way that I say, there's unknown factors in the healing equation. And what Norman Cousins said, which really moved me in his book Head First, The Biology of Hope, he said we have to reach out for the best that medical science has to offer, and we have to reach within to mobilize our own internal resources for healing. So we've always got both. We want to reach out for the best that science has to offer, but we need to reach in and mobilize our own internal resources for healing. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. And I think it's still light out. That's great. Enjoy summer. Only, what is it, 1 week away or 2 weeks? Something like that. But I'm short. It shows up. It shows up. Really?
Like, oh my God.
Oh, thank
From
you.
last month. I mean, it's like, that's crazy.
Thank you. It shows up fast. I got to remember to stay. I got to remember to eat less.
Well, I keep losing it.
Yeah,
mine is slow but sure, but his, he is.
Oh, you are sweet. Thank you. Okay, let me stop.